Welcome to Columbros, the podcast where bros talk about Columbo. I'm your host, Jeff Grubb. I got Mike Minotti with me, my fellow Columbro. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing pretty Columbo. How about you?
I'm doing Columbo as well. This episode, however we talk about that, we are talking about the episode Short Fuse, which is still in the first season, right? Where are we at in terms of that?
Yeah, second to last episode of the first season, actually.
Yeah, so
getting there.
We are getting there, and it's a pretty interesting one. I was pretty excited to see my old buddy Roddy McDowall playing the guest star of this episode. Roddy McDowall, most well known for Planet of the Apes. I like to see him. He plays the character Roger Stanford, who's going to get into some hijinks here. Maybe the most hijinksical character we've had yet in terms of murderers.
He's a bit of a goober, isn't he?
Yes, absolutely.
As far as a double murderer goes.
Yes, yeah. We'll get into all of that here pretty soon. God, let's see, where should we start here? This is a Short Fuse, obviously. Peter Falk back as Lieutenant Columbo, Roddy McDowall as Roger Stanford, and then a bunch of other guest stars, including Ida Lupino, James Gregory, William Wyndham. A lot of great acting in this episode that I had a lot of fun with. But overall, at least a very interesting episode. I was very happy to see the murder utensil used here, the murder device, because it's like, wait, are they really going to go for that? And they really do go for that. So let's hop into it. Our buddy Roddy McDowall, playing Roger Stanford, is in a photo lab. This turns out to be a dark room that he has in his office, and he seems to be piecing together some sort of cigar. He's like putting a bunch of stuff in a cigar case and into like little cigar holders, and he's building something. And then all of a sudden, he's like looking at the time. He goes back to building cigars. He's mixing stuff together. You get the sense he's up to no good. And that is confirmed when one of those cigars does a small, tiny explosion. And I'm immediately like, Mike, are we doing an exploding cigar murder?
It seems a little convoluted, but we sure are. So, yeah, that's funny. Hey, I will say, I love a good dark room. Don't you just like get excited when you see a dark room?
Dark rooms look great on TV. They look great in movies. It's just always a great setting for any sort of movie.
I just immediately in rapture when I see a character in a dark room. I'm like, well, what does this imply?
Right, yeah, because like they could be doing so much in there. Like obviously you could be developing photos, and that will play into the plot here for sure. But as Roger Stanford says later, it's like, no, that dark room is like a whole experimental room. I do all kinds of stuff in there, and he does do all kinds of stuff there, including tying weird copper around a nail inside of this little cigar box that he's putting together. He clearly looks like he is rigging something up, and we get the idea. Okay, well, this is going to be the thing that is going to explode and cause some sort of murder, but we're a ways off from that so far. As he finishes up building this exploding cigar box, we quickly cut to him driving through an industrial chemical plant, I should say. It looks like just a big industrial zone, and he's riding a little golf cart through it. And I'm like, oh, this is very different than what we've seen before. How did you feel about that, Mike?
Again, I like the vibe of a industrial plant so big. You have to have your own golf cart just to kind of get around in, right?
Yes, I've definitely worked in not like big like chemical industry areas, but I've worked in places that were like plenty big where it's like, oh yeah, this person always just takes their cart somewhere, or they have like one of those big adult tricycles with the basket on it, and they always ride that from one part of the plant to the other. And so like, yeah, this is very evocative for me. And having all of like the big chemical cauldrons in the background and stuff like that was always very interesting to see. He walks into an office that has a bunch of secretaries in there, and they're all busy. They're clacking away on their keyboards, and he's like immediately like, "Ooh, I'm a cheeky little guy." And you can tell he's up to no good. He's going to do some hijinks. And he pulls out the silly string and starts hitting someone in the hair with the silly string. And they're all like, oh, Roger, you're such a scamp. Why are you being like this? And he's just
incredible.
It's like really setting the tone right away, right?
Yeah, I love the way they were reacting to. Was silly string something new at this point?
That was definitely something that stood out to me. Everyone's like, "What is this fanciful invention you have here? Is this from the World's Fair?" And someone asked, "Did you invent this?" He's like, "No. It's what the fuck? It's silly string. Everybody, come on."
Is silly string still a thing? Do your kids play with silly string?
I definitely had Emmy ask me if I could get her some silly string about like 2 or 3 months ago.
Great.
So yes, it's still a thing. I don't know where she found out about it at, but she wants it. I was just like, yes. And the secret, I was like, fuck no, I don't want that in my house. I don't want to be picking the silly string off of everything. While he's doing this, he's like shouting and causing a scene. And like while he's doing this, another woman walks into the room and it's like, Mr. Stanford. We find out at this point this is Roger Stanford, and that name sticks out because as he was walking into this plant, the name Stanford Chemicals was everywhere. You saw the signs all over the building, and it was right there on the plaque as he walked in. Clearly, he is involved with the family that owns this, and he seems to be like some sort of heir to all of it, especially based on the way he's behaving, where it's like he's like
a nepo baby.
Yes, he's got nepo baby energy coming out of the wazoo. But this woman's like, someone's trying to get your attention. Mr. Buckner wants to see you. You need to come in here right now. And he's like, all right, okay, I'll come behave. But before he does that, he has a conversation with her about, hey, Buckner's going on this big trip. What's going on there? You should are you sure he's going to have everything? Because this woman is Mr. Buckner's secretary. Mr. Buckner seems like the man in charge here, even though Stanford's name is on the building. It doesn't seem like he's quite in charge. And as part of this conversation, Stanford's like, hey, you better not forget those cigars. That's the most important thing of all. You're going to get fired if you forget those cigars.
Especially the one I've rigged to explode.
Yes. And so she grabs the cigars. And there's no funny business at this moment exactly until he kind of gets a little bit closer to her, and you get the sense that there's something going on between the two of them. And at that moment, he gets into the coat and takes a little what looks like an individual cigar case, like something that holds 4 cigars, not a cigar carton that we're talking about. Like, oh, there's a big box of cigars. That's what he rigged up earlier. This is a small 4 cigar holder that you keep in your jacket. He takes that and puts it in like at the back of his pants to hide it for a little bit. And we don't know what he's going to do with that quite yet. But then he goes in to see Mr. Buckner, and we kind of get the setup of like, okay, here's what's happening here. Stanford sits down with Mr. Buckner. Buckner is, turns out, Stanford's uncle. He married his aunt, and that helped him take control of this company up to a point. He does not have a commanding share in sort of the ownership of the company. The aunt still has that, and she does not necessarily give control over to her husband. At the same time, Roger Stanford, the nepo baby scamp, he doesn't have a commanding share as well. So it's like everyone's got to kind of work together. But Buckner has the idea of, we're going to sell, and I'm going to try to do whatever I can to force this sale to happen. And that involves, hey, I'm going to expose your crimes to your aunt so she doesn't think fondly of you anymore. Because right now she does seem to be on your side. And I'm going to expose all these crimes you did, including forging her name at some casino in Vegas for whatever reason, as well as a bunch of other petty crimes. If you don't agree to share this statement saying that you are done with the company, you're moving on, and you think we should sell. And so it's like, oh, okay. So these guys are already butting heads all the way, and we are coming in at the moment where it's like it has reached its zenith, and something's got to give, and that thing is probably an exploding cigar.
Right, because, the aunt here still has a fondness for this nephew, as much of a chuckle fuck as he might be. So it is important for the uncle here to kind of make it seem like this is his own decision. He can't just straight up fire him or anything like that, because she won't like it. She doesn't necessarily want the company to be sold either. So he has a delicate situation here.
That's right. She, her brother founded it, and she still has a strong fondness for the company and all that. Buckner complains hey, if she didn't spoil you, Roger, I wouldn't have to deal with this. That's really the source of all these problems. And Roger's like, you know what? You're right. And when you're right, you're right. So I'm going to sign this thing tonight. You've won. Don't worry about it. In fact, I'll go tell my aunt tonight what's going on.
And I definitely won't explode you with a cigar.
And I was like, if you're thinking that, don't even think that for a second, because it's the furthest thing from my mind, the exploding cigar trick.
That would be so cliche.
Yeah, right?
So tacky.
Let's see. So in this moment, okay, Roger's getting ready to leave, and he's like, he's being like, oh, bon voyage and all that stuff. Have a good trip. And when he's leaving, he's like, Logan, the vice president, he's also not super happy with you trying to sell. He seems pretty pissed. And he seems to, he's on my side of things. And right then, Logan does show up along with a bunch of other executives. They all kind of walk into the office together. And that is when Stanford leaves. That's important for some of the trickery that happens later. Let's see here. On the way out, Stanford drops the cigar case, though. That cigar case from earlier, that little thing that holds the 4 cigars. He gets even closer to the secretary, Miss Bishop. They clearly are. They have a thing going on. He's like holding her and it's like, hey, I'll see you later tonight. And while he's like sort of blocking her view, he pulls the cigar case out of the back of his pants, drops it down, kicks it under the desk. So basically it'll go missing. You get the idea that he does not want his uncle to have access to those cigars on his trip. He wants him to use maybe new cigars, the exploding kind.
New exciting cigars that explode.
New cigar 2.0.
Oh my God.
The setup is not done for Stanford. He's got a couple other things he needs to pull off here, because we still have not seen him get the actual exploding the cigars into place. If that's happened, we haven't seen it. Well, turns out it hasn't happened yet. While he was in the office with his uncle, the Miss Bishop, the secretary, took the cigars that she got out of the cabinet out to the car, and with his coat, put it in there. So his coat is waiting for him. The cigars are waiting for him, and a briefcase is waiting for him, and that's it. And we know that.
It's getting convoluted. At a certain point, I was just like, okay, look, yes. I get it. He's going to end up with the exploding cigar.
It is one of the more complicated setups in the series so far, for sure. And that's it doesn't kind of even stop here, even though we're reaching the part where it's okay, we're going to break away from this and the murder's actually going to happen. There's a lot of other pieces that need to fall into place that are even more convoluted, in my opinion. He gets outside. There's someone cleaning the car so that it's clean for the uncle's trip, so he can just go ahead and enjoy the ride and just have his cigars in peace. And to kind of to distract this person, Roger says, hey, can you look at my car? I work here as well. There's something weird with it. Can you look at the wiring and make sure it's all good? The guy pops the hood, puts his head down, and in that moment, Roger swaps out the cigars, and then he also takes cigars out of the dash, so that there's no other option except for the exploding variety of cigars. He stands back up. Right then, the guy finishes looking at his car, and he's like, oh, you're crazy. Your car works just fine. He's like, oh, that's weird. Anyway, I got to go. So then he goes, and that's kind of this is it. It's all in motion now. And then we cut back and forth between Roger hanging out with Miss Bishop, the secretary. They're out of date. And the uncle,
kind of a sleazy date, aren't they at some kind of a raunchy nightclub?
Yeah, go cabaret sort of thing. Yeah, I felt like I was playing Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth. Yeah, absolutely. And then at the same time, Uncle Buck is on his car ride going to where he's going. It's a stormy night and those roads are dangerous. So there's some plausibility there that maybe the car didn't fucking explode. I don't know.
I'm a little confused about that myself.
Right. That's another one. It's huh? Really? Okay. So they're cutting back and forth. Eventually, he's like, "Hey, I need a cigar. Hand me a cigar. Oh, there's no cigars. Well, I guess I'll get some new ones out of here." I open it up, and homeboy's checking his watch. Roger's at this thing. He's checking his watch, which he wouldn't know when he was going to open the cigar case, which I guess activates the timer. But about 60 seconds later, the thing explodes. The car explodes, and it goes flying off a cliff. And there is our murder. Mike, I was definitely like, hey, I'm glad it was an exploding cigar. And yet, it did. There was a lot of stuff that had to happen to get us to this point.
It got a little convoluted. It was a little long just to get there. It was a bit okay just because, this character, Roger, was so much of a doofus. It was entertaining enough to watch his shenanigans.
Yes.
Yeah. But, maybe a bit much, a bit less attention paid to the chauffeur was also the detective who got all the dirt on Roger, right? Which is why he had to go. Convenient that he was also the chauffeur in the car.
Right. The chauffeur, Quincy Benson, I think, or something. Yeah. Quincy's his name.
Quincy, credited as Murphy for some reason, played by Lawrence Cook.
Right. Weird. And it's, so he was the chauffeur, but yes, he's also a lackey. He is someone that does the bidding of Uncle Buck. And he was the one presenting all of that paper, hey, you are a criminal, and we're going to tell your aunt about you. He's the one that had all that paperwork and stuff like that. So yeah, those two being together, getting killed at the same time in this double homicide, yes, a little bit convenient, but also something you could surmise that, of course, he's the chauffeur. He's going to be the one driving him, so that's how I should kill him when he's in the car.
Yeah. Sure.
So Roger's got to sort of wrap up a few more things to make sure everything's kind of in place, because it's not going to just be like, well, they're dead, I'm in the clear. There's more going on, and he needs to get even more people out of his way to actually accomplish what he's after, which you might be able to imagine is control of the company that was founded by his father. He goes home after his date, and he goes up to a room. We don't know whose room it is. He goes into the room, and we hear him typing. He's typing something out, and then he walks out with what looks like a briefcase. We find out later it's a typewriter. He puts that in the back of his car. He's wearing gloves the entire time, of course. Then he goes back up to that room. Looks like he's about to shut things down. And who else appears but Lieutenant Columbo, ready to go.
Yeah, I was just so happy when he finally shows up, right? Because that's like the great thing. Because of course he's not there in the very beginning, because you got to see the murder, and this one was kind of a long, convoluted murder. So Columbo finally shows up, like, "There's our guy, all right."
And it's like a little bit like a surprising time for him to show up, because like, hey, it still feels like we are in the setup of the murder. The murder did happen, so of course Columbo could show up at any time now. But it's like, no, this guy's still putting pieces into place. And suddenly Columbo's here. Like, does anyone actually know he's dead? Well, it's like, no, that we're going to find out very soon. They don't know if he's dead, but he is missing. He never arrived at where he was supposed to be. And most interestingly, there is a message. There is a phone call that he made. He left a message on an early answering machine. Again, that seems like a new thing to them as well. And I suppose that would have been new in the 70s. But he left a message on the answering machine at the house saying, "Hey, I'm headed here. I'm headed up to Pine Wild. I'm going to go, I'll be there in a few hours. Look out, I'll probably call you when I arrive. But hey, tonight Roger's going to come over and he's going to tell you something you're probably not expecting. But I think it's a wise move, and he'll tell you tonight. So stay up so you could talk to him." And of course, Columbo is hearing all of this. He also hears us, he hears Uncle Buck try to be like, "Hey, I need a cigar. Where's my cigar? There's no cigars up there. I guess I'll take one of these." So Columbo hears all this stuff, and he kind of already begins piecing stuff together. But early on, Roger seems to be in a situation where he's like, "Okay, yeah, I could still work with this. This is actually going to play into my hands a little bit." And we find out pretty quickly that Roger's going to be the kind of murderer on Columbo where he's one of the helper ones. He's one of the ones that is going to tag along with Columbo on a lot of stuff and be like, "Hey, let me point you in the right direction," which we don't always get that kind of murderer. In this case, he's definitely like, "No, I can't help myself. I want to be there for all this stuff," right?
Yeah, and he's kind of a little bit of a shithead too sometimes, like kind of keeping Columbo off balance. Like Columbo will be talking to other characters, and there's clearly things Columbo doesn't want that person to know, but Roger will just come out and say, like, "Yeah, he thinks it's a murder."
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, he seems to have little patience, which you can imagine is maybe the correct character choice in a lot of those circumstances. The aunt is pretty upset. She's like, there's definitely something wrong, even though there's been no accidents reported on the roads. She's like, "Hey, we know they didn't stop anywhere. They never would. He said he was going to have dinner once he arrived at their location, and he was going to call, and that never happened." So she's upset. And he, while this is happening, they listen to the message. Stanford's looking concerned, and the aunt mentions that, "Hey, you look upset. I thought you don't even like him." And of course, Columbo's overhearing that as well, and he's like, I've grown more fond of him recently."
Oh no, that was in the before times.
Everything. Oh well, all concerns are alleviated. Then you're more fond of him now. Fantastic. Columbo asks about Buckner seeing someone else to Stanford later, like when they're alone. Hey, maybe he's seeing someone else, and Stanford's like, "That's none of your business," which is like a suspicious way of putting it, right? So, so then clearly there must be someone else, and it's like at that point I'm like, I didn't know what he was getting at. Like, why is he being that way? This continues to be all part of the plan, which I think leans into that convolutedness, right?
Right. No, that's exactly it. That stank of convolutedness does kind of fall through constantly here. We're not exactly. I mean, even like the fact that Columbo was investigating this so early on, when it doesn't seem like it's a murder right away. There's something about there were protesters because of the sale and stuff like that. Lot of pieces falling into place.
Yeah, that's right. There's also Roger alludes to, there's been threats. He's been receiving threats, and someone put a stink bomb in their yard, which is like,
Oh, no.
maybe like, God, that's the Roger Stanton or Roger, whatever the fuck his name, Roger's MO of him being a little
Right.
scamp, the kind of guy with the
Right.
silly string. Who could have
We're all
possibly
looking
put a
for the guy
stink
who did
bomb?
this.
Yeah.
At least it wasn't an exploding stink bomb, right?
Right. So
Because
it's
they do
like,
make
okay.
clear that he is actually like a chemical wizard. Like he is actually like very good at this stuff. He just is too much of a shithead to be in charge of the company.
Right, but he does try to make it sound like, man, someone's trying to get my uncle. There's definitely been a lot of threats, and so he sets up that thread as well. Basically, he's putting down a lot of pieces on the board that he's going to have to pay off later. And I think the weird thing here is a lot of them end up paying off for him in a weird way. So it's like it kind of feels like a lot of luck breaks his way in order to believe this story. But the final thing before we get out of this scene is the aunt wants to know what's the thing that Uncle Buck said you were going to come talk to me about. You had something important. What is it? And he's like, oh, yeah, well, I'm going to go. I wanted to work in the legal department. So I decided to do that. I'm going to like take things seriously. I'm going to go work in the legal department. She goes, oh, okay. And she seems to buy that. Columbo does not overhear that part at that time. We cut to Columbo taking a ski lift for some reason. He's on this lift, and we find out he's very
Check off ski lift.
Yep. And he's very afraid of heights. He's definitely upset about that. But he is with a sheriff who is going to take him to the car that they found. It did fall off a cliff. And when they get there, basically it's like, hey, there's debris everywhere, and it's burnt to a crisp. And they're both like, well, the gasoline tank could have exploded on impact. And then they're both like, or something could have exploded beforehand.
Wouldn't it be relatively? Would there be some exploding debris on the road still from when it exploded? I guess I'm a little surprised they can't find out where the car exploded.
Yes, I definitely was confused by that.
I guess it's raining and then washed away. Maybe.
Man, I suppose I wish if that was their explanation, I wish they would have just said that. I suppose there is enough possibility for like a California heavy rain to be like, yeah, like there was like a lot of mud out there and it carries everything away, so it's really hard to tell where this happens. But they don't say anything like that. I was definitely confused. Like, yeah, I thought there would be debris up there, and then it'd be very easily to find a wreck based on that. But they don't talk about that at all. But they do see a lot of things are burned. They do find the chauffeur's cap completely intact. They mentioned that. And then like they surmise here there's an explosion, and it either was because it hit the wall when it went over the cliff, it hit the ground, it exploded then, or it exploded up on the road, and then that's the reason it crashed, and they can't tell which is which. We have another cut to the aunt talking about, hey, they think maybe he was murdered, or at least they're investigating it as a potential murder, and she's talking with the vice president, who is Vice President Logan, who is next in line. He's taking over, and he's like, no, it's probably not a murder. That they're just being extra cautious. But he does tell them, tells the aunt, hey, if there's any trouble with the police, come to me and I'll handle it. We cut to again very quickly we cut to Columbo in Roger's dark room. He's looking around a little bit. Rogers hits him with the silly string. So keeping up the antics there a little bit.
Hey.
And he says, my aunt says you think someone killed my uncle. And Columbo starts talking to him about his dark room instead.
Columbo silly strung himself, if I remember correctly.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
He's such a goofball, you see.
Right. Yes, setting him.
Coming out with it. Come on. You can't do Roger dirty like that. He would never to an officer of the law.
Right. An LEO, please. Yeah. And that does remind me, like early on, like Columbo's like, or the aunt's like, oh, the police commissioner said they were sending over their best. And then Roger's like, oh, really? Like looking over him like, oh, that's the best? He drives a bad car. How can this possibly be the best? So, yeah, that's part of the charm offensive there a little bit. In the dark room, they start talking about things that don't involve the murder. Columbo very quickly gets away from this idea that he's investigating it for murder. And instead, he wants to talk about Roger. He's like, hey, Roger, you got a lot of dangerous shit in here. And Roger's like, yeah, hell yeah, I do. Got all kinds of dangerous shit. I have, and I also have like a chemistry degree, an MBA, and lawyer. That's how he says it too, where it's like, oh yeah, I got my degree in chemistry, MBA, and lawyer. It's like, you just got
lawyer degree.
You got lawyer? Is that what you got? No, your law degree, fella. But yeah, he's very well educated. They make a big deal about that at this point. And he also says, hey, wait, I mean, it looks like I heard that you guys can even make explosions without like leaving residue or powder and stuff like that. That's pretty interesting. And he's like, yeah, I can do anything. Yeah. It's like, oh my God. Well, again, we're just going right at it here. And then Roger's like, okay, so you think someone put a bomb in the car, huh? That's what you're getting at. He's like, yeah, there could have been an explosion before the car crashed. Roger says that a lot of people have the ability to create explosives at the chemical plant. And he's like, yeah, man, there's like 60 people here that are chemists and 100 that know how to run the labs. And then there's like 2,000 people that work over there. And any one of them could want to kill him because he was going to sell the company. And they're all very mad about that. And it's like, oh, okay, he's trying to go back to that. Oh, he's getting a lot of threats. And there was a stink bomb. And Columbo's already got an answer for that. Like, hey, yeah, about that. We tried to track those down. And we can't find anything about it. Like, for example, that stink bomb, we like asked a bunch of people about it that night, and they said no cars even came down the road that night. It's like, oh, weird, Roger, that no one required a car to get there. Maybe they were just already there and set off a stink bomb in the yard. So that's not getting them anywhere. Columbo's already not buying that.
There you go.
All right, let's see here. Yes, those threats. He mentions that something strange is happening with the cigars. Columbo.
like the way they keep exploding.
The way that they keep exploding. Columbo's like, no, I listen. I think there's something fucking weird about these cigars. So to like get to the bottom of this, and I'm not exactly sure how he made those leaps at this point. He does explain why he's suspicious of it in a little bit, and I'm not sure if I necessarily like fully am on board with that explanation.
There was something like back when that voicemail was being played that Roger was looking at his watch, like the moment like the box opened, and Columbo noticed that. So I was like, "Whoa, is there some kind of ticking time bomb cigar box?"
Right. That's a pretty good point. So he probably was suspicious then. So, and the explanation is going to come up here pretty soon, so we'll just get to it. Basically, he's like, I talked to the guy that cleaned the car, and he said there's nothing in the car except for that cigar box, and then the other things that he brought in himself, like his briefcase and his coat. So it's only the cigar box could be the thing that exploded if there was an explosion. I'm like, well, I mean, people can like put an explosion under the car. What are you talking about? But whatever. Clearly, he knows that maybe there's something weird with that cigar box because of how Roger behaved. But to begin this process of investigating this, they go see Bishop to ask her about the cigars. And she's like, hey, what about the cigar case, the thing that he carried in his coat? That was missing. And she's like, well, no, I found that. I must have dropped that. And Roger's like, oh, what, do you think that got stolen so that he would have to open the cigar box? He's like, well, maybe, I don't know. Columbo's like, that's a possibility. So we're not beating around the bush. We're getting right into, this is an exploding cigar case, goddammit. I know one when I see one.
I'm an expert on exploding cigar cases.
But yeah, then that's when they get into like Columbo being very adamant that it could only have been the cigars that were the source of an explosion, if there was an explosion. It's the and then Roger's like, well, then it must have been the cigars then. And he's like, seems to be ready to roll with this theory. He's like, okay, I'm going to roll with this punch. All right. So this is what Columbo thinks. We're not getting out of it. And I'm like, I think you're giving up a little bit easy, but whatever. So he's like, okay, well then if that's the case, if it was the cigars, who could have gotten to the cigars to replace them and swap them out? And Columbo's like, well, you were here in the office the whole time. It was like, Bishop, how long were they sitting here? And she says, well, about 25, 30 minutes. And Columbo said, well, you were here the whole time. And she's like very quickly like, no, he never touched him. He never could have got to them. That didn't happen. And then Roger immediately like, here's a list of names of people that came into the office, including Vice President Logan and a bunch of other people that don't matter because really it's about Vice President Logan. And Columbo's like, okay. And it once again feels very similar to when Roger was setting up the list of, the stink bomb and the phone threats and all that stuff. It feels very similar to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see here. There is a handful of other things, though. Let's see. Columbo tells Roger that he found a letter that explains Logan was using Roger to get his aunt upset about the sale. so that Logan is basically double crossing both the aunt and Roger himself. And so that he should probably be taken out of the situation if that's the case. And this letter is like, that's a loose end that Columbo wants to tie up. He's like, I want to find the typewriter that this was written on. And Quincy, the spy, the lackey for Uncle Buck, he wrote this. So I got to find that typewriter, and I can't find it. So Columbo's like, well, do you have any idea about, like, did he have a secret hideaway or something that he could have written that at? And Roger's like, well, no problem. He's like, oh, well, there is something. I'm not exactly sure where it is, but he definitely did mention something one time about that. But if I could think of it, I'll try to help you out. And he doesn't have an answer for him at that point. Stanford tries to. Oh yeah, go ahead.
It's too bad we can't tie Roger to the scene of Quincy's apartment or anything like that. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. Stanford tries to leave. Bishop says that she's worried, especially because he's got those pictures of her, which would be very embarrassing if
these pictures.
Yes, these pictures of her that are they expose her. And that would be embarrassing because this investigator, this detective, is looking around. He could very easily find them. He's like, no, I have them. I cleared them out of my office. It's not going to be any problem. And she's like, well, I'm still really worried. And like, as she's saying that, he's like rolling up the window and driving away. It's like, oh, okay. He is leaving her out to be high and dry. So already kind of like, okay, it seems like this might be a sacrificial lamb of some sort. Meanwhile, Columbo is back talking to the sheriff at the crash site. He says, hey, the gas tank did explode, and there's nothing to suggest a foreign inflammable. Like, the theory's still out there, maybe as a possibility, but like what caused the gas tank to explode, they're still not sure yet, but there's no reason to think that it is some powder or some explosive that would be typical and seen in a lot of places. All right, cut to Roger sneaking into a location to drop off a typewriter at Quincy's hideout. That's the next scene.
That's a good name for a bar, Quincy's hideout.
Yeah, Quincy's hideout's a very good name. The cops show up and start chasing him. Like, he's not doing a very good job here. They start chasing him. They catch him, and then they take him to his aunt, and Columbo shows up right away. Roger says he needs to tell Columbo something in private. And it's like, well, I'm like, at this point, I'm like a little bit confused. And then, like, it quickly starts to come together. It's like, oh, there is more to this plan than I originally realized. And he's trying to put these other pieces into place. But before he gets that secret from Roger, Columbo wants to go get debriefed from the police officers that caught Roger. They did find the typewriter. They also found multiple dossiers that Quincy had written up about some of the other people that Uncle Buck was working with, specifically Vice President Logan, but a handful of other executives as well. The aunt's like, wait, dossier? I also found a sort of write-up about Logan that Uncle Buck had, and I found that, and I realized now that Quincy was doing his dirty work and trying to, like, work against these people. And I'm going to I did burn that because I hate that this is happening. I realized Quincy was spying for Buckner, and I kind of want to just move on from all of this. In the meantime, the police officer also notes to Columbo, hey, Quincy's got a big bank deposit. Seems like he made a lot of money from, like, doing this dirty work. And then they also found a picture of something at Quincy's hideaway. And it's a very sensitive picture. What could it possibly be? Well, very quickly, it's easy to put together. Like, what's the only other picture we've been talking about this whole episode? It's a picture of Miss Bishop with Uncle Buck. That is especially surprising. But it's like, yeah, something has happened here. And
if only we knew somebody who's been spotted at a bunch of Quincy's places with access to a dark room.
Yes.
And all other sorts
and maybe
of
if he was
things.
taking pictures all throughout this episode, which, hey, by the way, all throughout this episode, he's taking pictures of people at every opportunity. It is very weird.
Oh, he's poor man. He's just not the best murderer.
He's not the best murderer, no.
Despite the convoluted exploding cigar box.
He also left the negative there at Quincy's. Roger did, so that it would be like, okay, the people would find that whether he took the original picture or not. Seems like he was trying to, like, leave enough pieces in place that whether he got caught or didn't get caught, someone would find evidence of that, and that's part of his plan.
I guess I don't know much about like photos splicing in the 70s. I can't imagine. It has to be difficult to make that look actually real. I would think that you'd be able, because you'd have to actually cut pictures and then put them in, right?
I mean,
I don't know how it works.
the way that Columbo does eventually explain it is like, double double exposing
Pictures.
Yes, exactly. Like, yeah, if you are good at trick photography like that, this is stuff that people were able to do. It would require like using the right chemicals to get certain colors to disappear, and then they kind of do like matte photos the way that stuff used to work. It's possible. It's probably very difficult, but again, that's when you have the explanation. Well, this guy is a super genius. Like, yeah, he's a fucking
Right.
goon, like we said. He's a goober, but he's actually really technically savvy. And so that can explain away a lot of this stuff. I think as far as the writers are concerned. The aunt is not super happy about any of this, especially when she finds out that her husband was allegedly cheating on her with his secretary.
And they try to guilt Columbo for it, like, oh, you had to like dig around and look how upset people are now because of your meddling.
And this also seems like part of Roger's plan, which is like when it got very convoluted to me. This is when it's like, okay, listen, I suppose he knows his aunt well enough to know that she would react this way. It would want to shut everything down, and she would have the power as this, millionaire, basically essentially a billionaire of her time, saying, hey, I don't want any of this stuff out here and leave me alone. And that is how she reacts here. She says, Columbo, get out of here. I don't want you around anymore. In fact, I'm going to burn these pictures. And he's like, this is evidence. And she's like, it would be evidence if there was a murder, but you haven't proved there's even a murder yet. So she's like, no way. I want you gone. Get out of here. And so the whole idea here is like, okay, this stuff, people believe this all happened, and she got people to clam up about it because she has enough power to make that happen. And that seems to be like one of the key pieces of Roger getting away with this is he has a lot of people believing stuff about each other, but the reason they never like figure it out is because they don't talk to each other about it because the aunt shut it down. There is a one more thing in this scene. It's not a traditional one more thing where Columbo goes, oh, hey, one more thing. Sure. Roger talks to his aunt and basically says, hey, I knew for years about Bishop and Buckner, Uncle Buck, and I asked Uncle Buck to stop, but I only kind of really got worried about it recently when I realized that Quincy started snooping around and he figured it out, and that's when I got concerned about it getting out to other people. Columbo, it does overhear all of this and then kind of looks over, and then that's right when Roger hugs her over his shoulder, gives a smile like, hey, I'm getting away with it. Look at me. I know what I'm doing, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Gee golly gee.
Gee golly gee. Meanwhile, back at the plant, Stanford's suited up, ready to go. He's going to run the place. And he goes into the office, and he sees Bishop. He sees the secretary that he's been dating, and she has a pink slip. And looks, oh, she got fired. And Roger goes, oh, no. Actually, what we wouldn't do, this is a misunderstanding. You're actually just being, I think he says, like, transferred to the desert in Arizona or something. And then, again, like, when he was, like, driving away, rolling up the window, he basically does that form of it, but with the walking version, where he's just, like, giving her finger guns and walking away, being like, yeah, we're going to see each other all the time.
It's going to be great. It's going to be even better than before.
And,
wow.
And then the door sort of slams while he's halfway through that sentence. So, very awkward, but clearly trying to get her out. And then we find out that Logan was also fired. And he's like, oh, that's weird. That's confusing. He said, well, I didn't do that. My aunt, she did that, and she has every right to do that. I don't know why she did it, but she did that. So that means the woman that did not sleep with Uncle Buck, that some people believe did sleep with Uncle Buck, she's gone. She's going to be out of the picture. And Vice President Logan, who is the last living person that stood between Roger and becoming the CEO of the company that his father founded, is also out of the picture. So now everything has worked out just fine and dandy, and Roger is now in charge of his company.
He did it.
He did it. Well done, murderer. Yeah, you figured it all out. And then Columbo shows up, of course, and he say, hey, I got a call from the sheriff. They found something new. We should go up and see about it. Roger's like, I'm too busy. I'm an important man now.
I love, of course, he's like, no, that's the last thing I want to do.
Yeah. And Columbo's like, well, I just thought you would care about, this is your uncle. He died. I thought you would want all the information. And then Logan's like, well, I'm going. and I'm pretty pissed. I think there's something up here. And then Roger's like, okay, I guess if it's about my uncle, and you know how much I love my uncle, I'm more fond of him now than ever before.
Right, especially now he's fucking dead.
Now that he's fucking dead, I guess I'll come along. They get up there, they're back on Chekhov's ski lift, and they all get on there together. And this is when Columbo springs his plan of action. He's like, you know what? I made a big boo-boo, an oopsie-whoopsie fucky-wucky. Here's the cigar case. It never exploded. Here it is. You can see it yourself. It's all good to go. So that means all the things I was thinking can't possibly have been the case. And it only exploded because it went off the cliff, hit the ground, and the tank exploded. And that explains it all. So, hey, all that stuff about me thinking that you set Logan up, or he's like, oh, well, it doesn't matter that, Logan was betraying you and trying to sell you out. And Logan's like, what? That's a lie. And it doesn't matter that Bishop was sleeping with Uncle Buck, and Uncle Buck was cheating on your aunt. And then Roger's like, you're not supposed to say any of this stuff. Like this, we agreed. And he's like, well, it doesn't matter now because it wasn't a murder. And then throughout this whole time period, Roger's just like, that fucking cigar box is going to explode if you open that up. And that's all he cares about.
I know we've been talking about this episode being like a little weird, mediocre. This last scene sure is fun.
It's a really good time. I had it on the TV, and Steph's like, this is wild stuff. She hasn't watched a lot of Columbo. So the scene, she's like, okay, what is going on here? And I kind of had like set it up for her, but it's like, I think she was pretty impressed by it. So this is, Columbo's plan. He's got the cigar box, and he's like, you know what? I had these theories. If this was an exploding cigar box, which it isn't, of course not. But if it was, I have this theory that you set that up, and then you forged Quincy's report about Logan doing all this stuff, and you're a photo whiz, and any photo whiz could splice pictures together to make it look like Uncle Buck was bucking the secretary Bishop. So, well, yeah, but isn't that wild? I would think all that when this thing clearly isn't going to explode. And he's like, you know what? We should have a cigar. And he opens it up, and Roger's like, fuck, looking at his watch, and they're doing a bunch of cuts to his watch. And at this point, like, Logan and Columbo are just going back and forth, like, yeah, that is wild. You ever thought that? Huh? These cigars, huh? And then Roger breaks. He's like, just shut the fuck up. Please shut up. I don't know what I'm going to do. He opens the door. He's like, I need to throw this thing out. Please let me throw this thing out. He takes it from Columbo. It's all falling apart on the ground. He's not sure which of the cigars that have now fallen out of this case are the ones that are going to explode. And slowly, Columbo's like, you dumb bitch. and then basically the episode ends with Roger finally realizing that he'd been fooled here, and then he just laughs until the episode goes to credits. Yeah, like a maniac.
Yeah.
It is a weird episode. There's a lot of moving parts, which is maybe not ideal for this kind of mystery How Catch 'em show, and yet mostly pretty fun. A lot of fun choices.
Yeah, you would say even like a quote unquote mediocre Columbo episode has stuff that is fun. That last scene is obviously great. The killer is a lot, and his plan is convoluted. But Roddy McDowell is fun to watch. He does a very good job of being this shithead who thinks he's getting away with something. Yeah, it's an interesting episode. I think that this was, even though this didn't air last, I think this was the last episode filmed in the first season. It was maybe even tacked on a bit because the show was so successful, kind of squeezing one more in there. I don't know if that has anything to do with the quality of it, if it was rushed or anything like that, but it's an interesting little factoid.
Now, it is worth pointing out, and I did realize this because of the Columbo File blog about it.
Yes, and thank you, Columbo File, which is always just the best source for information on all things Columbo if you're online.
Exactly. So what I do is I watch the episodes and I take my own notes because that helps me like really do the recaps a lot better. But the Columbo File fills in a lot of the pieces for me. What it filled in this time for me is Roddy McDowell's pants, where you could just clearly see the outline of his penis. It was the 70s, and that's just what people did. And it's like, yeah, that's that man's dick and balls. There they are, clear as day.
That man's Caesar.
Little Caesar out there for everybody. And it's like, all right, then. Yeah, I guess that was the style of the time to let an onion hang down there from the middle of your pants. But other than the absurd wardrobe, which, yeah, again, style of the time, whatever.
70s.
Yeah, 1970s. I had a lot of fun with this episode. I think every season should have an exploding cigar episode. Like,
This is definitely the most Wile E. Coyote murder we've had yet, right?
Exactly. And I think the show earns one of those every like 5 or 6 episodes. That's a pretty cool thing to like go to, where it's like, hey, we can be silly, and we know the kind of killer that we need to pull that off. And I think for as silly as it all was, Roddy McDowall does a good job of selling it. Like this, it feels like the kind of person that's like, hey, I'm so smart, and I don't, and so like devil may care that I can pull this off. And I sort of believe him at a lot of the points through this. Now, yeah, it's like clearly getting everyone to react the way you need them to react in order to make this whole plan work. That is, a bit absurd. But once we're in it, I don't care that much about that. That's not really a hang up for me at that point.
Is it possible that this was inspired by that supposed CIA plot to kill Castro with an exploding cigar?
Almost certainly, right? I mean, yeah, because these are Cuban cigars and all that stuff. I mean, Cuban cigars is like a very common thing. And
you think Cuban cigars are really that good? Like,
Probably not. I always think that sort of thing is like sort of the wine sort of thing, where people convince themselves it's better because they talk it up, and so
Sure.
they do think it's better, but it's actually just all in their head.
How many people in history do you think have been killed by an exploding cigar? Is it like tens? Hundreds?
It's probably like tens. Yeah. Tens instead of dozens. It's somewhere between tens and dozens, right? Yeah.
If you know anybody that's been killed by an exploding cigar, we would love to hear about it.
Absolutely. All right, Mikey. Let's go ahead and like put this on the chart here. What's your initial opinion of like overall about this episode? While I get the ranking up, so we can figure out where it's going to fit in.
It's definitely one of the lower ones, I would say. It's fine, still fun to watch. Maybe kind of there with dead weight. Is it better than what's our lowest rank right now? Is it dead weight?
I'm getting it up. Hang on, let me see here if I got it. Columbo.
Well, careful now. Make sure your pants aren't too tight if you're doing that.
Oh man, my whole Edge browser just crashed. It couldn't handle it. Couldn't handle the Roddy McDowall. If you know what I mean?
Getting it up, and now you're edging. Yeah. What's going on here, Jeff?
I think yes. I'm trying to remember what because right now the number one is still the first episode, I believe. That's still
was it? We did like. Was it suitable for framing that we liked a lot? Also,
we did like suitable for framing a lot. Yes,
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're correct.
All right, let me try this again. Let's see here. Drive.google.
I believe. Just imagine that you're inside your uncle's chauffeur / detective's apartment, and you're working away on his mechanical typewriter that you're going to take out of there.
Okay, so suitable for, you're right. Suitable for framing is our number 1. Murder by the Book is number 2. Lady in Waiting is number 3. Death Lends a Hand is number 4, and Dead Weight is number 5. I think I put this up right above Dead Weight. I think.
Yeah, I think there's still something more fun about this than Dead Weight, if just for that last scene alone.
Right.
I think that's right.
Death Lends a Hand. That's the one with the guy that runs the security firm, right?
Yes, that one's great.
And that one's great. I like that one a ton. I especially love that killer.
Very good. And we're going to see him again in season 2.
Right. So in our Killer Hall of Fame right now, we have Dale Kingston, Ken Franklin from Murder by the Book, and then Beth Chadwick. Do we want to put Roger up for consideration for the Killer Hall of Fame?
No, he's a fun goober, but he's not very good. I do appreciate it would be in the Murder Weapon Hall of Fame because the exploding cigar. But this guy was he just wasn't doing nearly as good a job. He does the classic thing where he starts moving on his plans way too fast. I think Lady in Waiting had the same problem. Like, oh yeah, all the people who are in the way of my corporate climb are dead. Time to start climbing the next day. It's like, hey, let's maybe wait a second. Wait for when you're cleared of suspicion of murder. But nope, they just really go for it.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want to knock off Beth Chadwick from Lady in Waiting in favor of Roger here. Yeah, listen, fun kill. You're right. Great weapon in terms of murder weapon. But overall, a silly fun time in a season of television that earned its right to have a silly fun time.
Sure, absolutely. There will be other silly fun times. I mean, just wait till Columbo goes to England. That's a silly fun time. You want to see some ridiculous murderers? Oh my God.
All right, Mikey, that does it for Short Fuse. What do we have next in terms of the next episode?
Yeah, the last episode of season 1 is a blueprint for murder. An evil, murderous architect, Jeff.
All right, well, we're going to get to that real soon. In the meantime, Mikey, thank you for hanging out with me talking about Columbo.
Thank you, Columbro.
Thank you for being a Columbro. Thank you all of you for being a Columbros, which you all are if you're listening to this episode. We'll be back very soon with another one. We're going to try to catch up on our schedule. Look out for that if you are a Patreon subscriber. If you're listening to this on the free feed, if you want to catch up and get on to the next episode a little bit early, you can do that by subscribing to the Patreon, patreon.com/GameMess. All right, thanks for listening, everybody. Until next time, have a good one. Take care of yourself, and goodbye. Thank you.